The first thing I remember is the smell of antiseptic and the rhythmic, hollow beep of a heart monitor. The hospital walls were a sterile, blurring white. I'd done it. I'd actually collapsed. Right in the middle of the final round interview, the one for the internship that was supposed to finally get me out. The one that meant everything. I was 20 years old. Humiliated. And my body felt hollowed out. I fumbled for my phone. Me fingers trembling. I just needed, I don't know, comfort. I texted my family group chat. I'm in the hospital. I collapsed at my interview. I stared at the ceiling for hours. Nothing. Then, finally, my phone lit up. It was a text from my mother. Jennifer, your father and I have decided. You are too selfish and demanding. You are no longer a part of this family. My breath caught. It didn't feel real. And then, before I could even read it a second time, another notification appeared right below it. My sister, Ashley, had hearted the message. Have you ever been made to feel like you were the problem, just for needing help? Let me know your story down in the comments. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. Something inside me, something that had been bent for 20 years, didn't break. It just snapped straight. The fog of exhaustion was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp adrenaline. My hands weren't shaking from weakness anymore. They were steady. I ripped the adhesive tape off my arm and pulled the IV needle out myself. The monitor flatlined with a long, piercing wail, but I was already swinging my legs off the bed. I grabbed my laptop. My dad, Michael, is an investment banker. He lives by spreadsheets and trusts data, not people. 2 years ago, when I started law school, he'd made me a co-administrator on all the family management accounts. His logic was simple. I was the responsible one, the one with a future in contracts and compliance. I was his failsafe. I opened the banking portal. The screen glowed in the dark hospital room. And there it was. A log of every transaction. A perfect record of their love. Pending transfer, $10,000. Memo Ashley startup seed money. Scheduled transfer. Next week, $8,000. Memo Ashley Chita networking. And there, right at the top, the automatic payment for the mortgage on our family home in Atlanta. I stared at that hearted message from my sister one last time. Then I went back to the banking portal. This wasn't revenge. It was accounting. My fingers flew across the keyboard. New password. Security questions updated. Freeze all active accounts. I saw the $10,000 transfer to Ashley. Cancel. I saw the $8,000 networking fund. Cancel. I saw the automatic payment for the Atlanta mortgage. Cancel. I didn't hesitate. I just clicked. I scrubbed every cent of scheduled support. In less than 5 minutes, I had financially firewalled myself from the people who had just disowned me. I shut the laptop, took a deep breath, and for the first time in months, the crushing weight in my chest was gone. It was replaced by a terrifying, absolute clarity. You have to understand. I wasn't just tired. I was running on fumes for 4 straight months. My life in Chicago was a tiny, gray studio apartment. My diet was a rotation of instant noodles and discount bread. I was a second-year law student at UChicago. And I was drowning. I worked 2 jobs. By day, I was a research assistant, buried in the law library, highlighting case law for a professor. By night, I was a bartender, slinging drinks until 2 a.m., my feet aching, the smell of stale beer stuck in my hair. All of it. All of that grinding was for this one interview. A summer internship at one of the biggest law firms in the country. This was the one. This was the shot that would change my entire future. It wasn't just a job. It was the finish line. A week before the interview, I was looking at my bank account. I had $63. I couldn't even afford a new, professional blazer. I couldn't even afford a decent meal. So, I called my mom. Jennifer. I still believed, back then, that she was just frugal. I told her, Mom, I know money is tight, but I have this huge interview. I was wondering, could I maybe pull a little from my trust fund? This was my money. A $500,000 trust my grandfather had set up specifically for me. I just needed a fraction of it. Just to get through this. Her voice on the phone was cold. Dismissive. Evelyn. You're an adult now. You can't just call every time you need something. Everything is tied up. Your father and I are completely overextended. She made me feel small. Irresponsible. But Mom. It's my trust. Don't argue with me. Jennifer snapped. We're done with this. And she hung up. I felt stuck. Ashamed. I sat there in my tiny apartment. Eating plain pasta. Wondering how I was going to make it. And then, out of habit, I opened Instagram. My sister, Ashley, had just posted. It was a picture of her, posing in front of a brand new, pearly white Tesla. She was in Silicon Valley, wearing a designer jacket, holding up champagne. The caption read, "So grateful for my #1 investor." My mom finalized the seed money for my startup. Big things coming. Girl boss, entrepreneur life. They were overextended. But they could send her tens of thousands of dollars for a startup that, as far as I could tell, was just a really expensive Instagram account. I didn't sleep for a week. I worked every shift. Studied every spare minute. I starved myself to save money for the bus fare to the interview. I was running on nothing but caffeine and sheer panic. And that brings us back to today. I was in the interview. The final round. The managing partner was looking at me. Smiling. "So, Evelyn," he said, "tell us why you believe you're a good fit for this firm." I opened my mouth to answer, and nothing came out. The room started to spin. The walls felt like they were closing in. I remember seeing the look of concern on his face. And then just blackness. I'd worked until I literally collapsed. All because my mother told me they were overextended. I'd barely been back in my apartment for an hour. The adrenaline still humming under my skin. When my phone started screaming, it was Ashley. I let it ring 3 times. Just to listen to the sound. Then I answered. "What did you do?" The shriek was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. There was no hello. "Nah. Are you okay?" "No. I heard you were in the hospital." Just pure, undiluted panicks. "My accounts are frozen," she screamed. "My credit cards are declined. The transfer for the launch party. It's gone. What did you do?" "Evelyn." I sat down on my threadbare sofa. My voice, when it came out, was cold. Colder than I'd ever heard it. Mom was very clear. "Ashley," she said, "I'm no longer part of the family." "What? What does that have to do with anything?" "Well, if I'm not part of the family," I said, looking at my own empty refrigerator, "then I certainly shouldn't be involved in the family finances. I'm just removing myself from the equation. It's what she wanted." I could hear her sputtering. Affrantique. Gasping sound. You can't just do that. I need that money. My launch party is in 2 days. The caterers. That sounds like a you problem, Ashley. Not a family problem." "You're jealous," she finally shrieked. "You've always been jealous of me." "No," I said. "I was just tired. Goodbye." I hung up. My phone immediately lit up again. "Ashley." I declined. It rang again. "Ashley." Declined. Then, a new text message. From Mom. "I don't know what game you think you're playing, but you have created an absolute mess. You are selfish and destructive. Your father will hear about this when he gets out of his conference." I stared at the words. Selfish. Destructive. The same words they always used. I was selfish for needing help. I was destructive for... what? Stopping them from? Stealing from me? An hour later, my aunt tagged me in a Facebook post. It was from Mom. "It's so sad when children forget all the sacrifices their parents made for them. We gave you everything. And this is the thanks we get. Praying for our family." I read it. And any last lingering flicker of guilt I might have felt just evaporated. They weren't sorry. They weren't even embarrassed. They were just angry. They'd gotten caught. They were angry. Their golden child was inconvenienced, and their scapegoat had finally stopped bleeding. I looked at the text message from my mom again. Your father will hear about this. Good. I whispered to the empty room. I hope he does. I was done waiting for them to react. It was time to get ahead of it. That Facebook post? With my mom playing the martyr? Settled it. This wasn't a mess I'd created. This was a pattern of behavior. A systematic siphoning. This wasn't a family drama anymore. This was a legal case. My hands were steady. I wasn't a daughter. I was a law student. And I was going to treat this exactly like a case. I didn't call my dad again. Not yet. I called Professor Davies. She's my faculty advisor. A senior partner at a major Chicago firm. And the one who had set up the internship I'd fainted at? Her voice was sharp. Professional. Evelyn. I heard what happened at the interview. Are you all right? I'm fine. Professor? I said. My voice is flat, and even as hers. But I have a situation. I need a lawyer. A serious one. I believe my mother, who is also my financial administrator, has been committing fraud. There was no shock in her voice. No judgment. Just a brief pause. I know exactly who you need to call, she said. He's the best forensic accountant in the state. And I'm connecting you with a family law attorney who eats people like this for breakfast. Check your email. Now. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a glass-walled conference room high above the Chicago River. The air smelled like quiet power. The lawyer, a man named Harrison, listened intently as I laid out the facts. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just presented the evidence, the frozen banking portal, the transfer logs to Ashley, my mom's texts, my empty bank account. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. Ms. Hale, he said. Just to be clear, you are authorizing us to perform a full forensic audit on every account tied to your name, your father's name, and this family trust. I slid my laptop, still open, to the banking portal. Across the mahogany table. I want a full accounting. Every dollar. Every transfer. For the last 5 years. I wasn't just stopping future payments. I was launching a full-scale investigation into the past. He slid the retainer agreement in front of me. I signed my name. Evelyn Hale. Without a tremor. As I rode the elevator down, I finally took out my phone. My dad, Michael, would be out of his conference soon. I sent him a single, clear text. Dad, I've retained legal counsel and authorized a full forensic audit of the family accounts and the trust. There are massive discrepancies. Please call me as soon as you land. I put the phone in my pocket. I wasn't the broke, collapsing student anymore. I was a client, and I was finally going to get some answers. It took 3 days. 3 days of absolute, deafening silence from my family. Then, Harrison, the lawyer, called. Evelyn, he said. His voice clipped. The preliminary audit is complete. I've also just spoken with your father. He's flying in. We need to meet. Tomorrow. My office. 10. I walked into that conference room. And my dad, Michael, was already there. He was sitting at the head of the long, mahogany table, staring out the window. His suit immaculate. He looked pale. Rigid. He just nodded at me. His jaw tight. Harrison didn't waste time on pleasantries. He opened a thick, red binder and slid copies to both of us. Thank you for coming in, Mr. Hale. I'll be blunt. What we found is extensive. He started with what we already knew. The $10,000 monthly transfers to Ashley. The $8,000 networking bonuses. He confirmed my sister's startup was a shell. We can find no business license. Mr. Hale. No revenue statements. No inventory. No incorporation. As far as we can tell, the business does not exist beyond an Instagram account. My dad's face went from pale to ashen. He was an investment banker. A shell company set up to launder family money. He understood exactly what that meant. That, Harrison continued, turning a page, was just the surface. Evelyn, you asked your mother about your trust fund? She said it was tied up. I said, That was a lie, Harrison said flatly. It wasn't tied up. It's gone. Every dollar of the $500,000. Transferred over the last 18 months. In increments small enough to avoid automatic bank flags. Directly into Ms. Ashley's startup account. I felt the air leave my lungs. $500,000. My entire future. Stolen. My dad put his hand over his mouth. His eyes closed. I could see the numbers clicking behind his eyelids. But that, Harrison said, his voice dropping, isn't why I called you both in. He turned to the last page in the binder. It was a document. A loan agreement. When the trust fund ran dry 2 months ago, your mother, Jennifer, appears to have gotten desperate. She took out a second mortgage on your primary residence in Atlanta. My dad's head snapped up. What? That's impossible. I'd have to sign. Harrison slid the paper in front of him. She applied for $200,000. The loan was approved. And here, he said, tapping the signature line, is the problem. I leaned in. I saw 2 signatures. Michael Hale and Evelyn Hale. We ran a preliminary analysis. Harrison said quietly, these are high-quality forgeries. Your signature, Michael. And yours? Evelyn. She committed bank fraud. My dad didn't speak. He just stared at his own name. Forged on a document that put his entire life at risk. The silence in that room was absolute. This wasn't favoritism anymore. This wasn't a mother being overindulgent. My mother was a criminal. She hadn't just lied to me and stolen from me. She had committed multiple felonies against me and my father, risking our home, our credit, and our entire financial security, all to continue funding my sister's fantasy life. The last invisible thread holding our family together didn't just snap. It was obliterated. My dad didn't say a word for the rest of the meeting. He just sat there, a statue of cold fury. When it was over, he stood up, adjusted his cuffs, and walked out without a single glance at my mother, who had shown up uninvited, weeping in the hallway. He flew back to Atlanta that night. He didn't go home. He went straight to his own lawyer. By 9 a.m. the next morning, Jennifer had been served with divorce papers. My dad, the agent of justice, didn't hesitate. He filed for an emergency freeze on all joint assets. He cut off every credit card, every joint account, every line of credit. The empire my mother had built on my father's money and my stolen future crumbled in less than 24 hours. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of the loudest silence I'd ever heard. And then, last night, there was a knock on my apartment door. I opened it, and I almost didn't recognize her. It was Jennifer. She looked small. Her expensive hair was a mess. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow, and the designer coat she was wearing was rumpled, like she'd slept in it. The aura of smug superiority that she used to wear like a perfume was gone. Evelyn, she whispered, her voice raspy. Please, you have to stop this. You have to call them off. I just stood there, my hand on the doorknob. Michael. Your father? He's divorcing me, she sobbed, as if this was news to me. He's taking everything. The house. They're going to foreclose on the house. It's all gone. She reached out and grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Please. Evelyn, you have to do something. Think about your sister. She's losing everything. She has nothing. Think about your sister. The words echoed in the hallway, and as she said them, the scene in front of me dissolved. All I could see was that glass-walled conference room. I saw my father's face, as Harrison slid the forged loan agreement across the table. I saw my mother, who had been waiting in the lobby, finally push her way in, demanding to know what was happening. My father hadn't yelled. He hadn't raised his voice. He just looked at her with a coldness that was terrifying. His voice was low, precise, and it cut through her sobs like a scalpel. You let her collapse, he said, his voice shaking. Not with sadness, but with a pure, controlled rage. You let my daughter nearly destroy her future, so your daughter could play pretend in Silicon Valley. We're done. Jennifer. We're done. He blinked. I was back in my doorway. My mother was still babbling. Still crying about Ashley. Still trying to find a lever to pull. She hadn't. Not even once. Asked me if I was okay. She hadn't said she was sorry. She was just a machine. Programmed to protect her golden child. And her main power source had just been cut off. I turned away from her. Walked to my desk. And picked up a single, folded document. I walked back to the door and handed it to her. She looked at it. Confused. Her tears stopping. What? What is this? You said I should do something for my sister. I said. My voice was as calm and as quiet as my father's had been. That is a copy of the formal criminal complaint for bank fraud and aggravated forgery that I filed with the district attorney's office this morning. I already did. Her face went completely white. She stared at the paper. Her mouth opening and closing. But no sound came out. Goodbye. Jennifer. I closed the door. It's been a year. The divorce is final. The dust has finally settled. Jennifer pled guilty to 2 counts of aggravated fraud. Given her lack of a prior record, the judge was lenient. No jail time, but she got 5 years of probation and intensive, court-mandated therapy. The grand Atlanta house, the monument to their marriage, was sold at auction. Every last cent of the equity was liquidated to pay back the $200,000 fraudulent loan. And to begin the long process of repaying my $500,000 trust. As for Ashley, the startup vanished in a puff of smoke. The Tesla was repossessed. The luxury Silicon Valley apartment was lost. She works as a bartender now. In a dive bar. It turns out reality was the one bill my mother could no longer pay for her. My dad, Michael, and I were closer than we've ever been. He moved into a sleek condo in downtown Atlanta. He calls me every Tuesday and Friday. Just to check in. And that internship I collapsed at, I got a real one. He made a call. And I spent the entire summer in the general counsel's office at his investment bank. We were having dinner last week. In a restaurant high above Chicago. Overlooking the river. He's been in his own therapy. Trying to unwind the 20 years of lies he'd lived with. He stared into his glass for a moment. You know, he said quietly. The therapists. They explained it. Jennifer's. She saw Ashley as an extension of herself. Her second chance. He talked about my mother's old, failed ambitions as a gallery curator. Ashley was her masterpiece. The one she could pour everything into. The one who would finally make her a success. And she saw you. Your independence. Your grades. The fact that you were practical. Like me. She saw it as a judgment. A threat. He finally looked up. His eyes meeting mine. It was never about you. Evelyn. It wasn't that you weren't enough. It was that, to her, you were competition. It was always about her. I just nodded. The tightness in my chest finally unraveling. I'd known it. On some level. But hearing him say it. Hearing the why. It set something free. I get that now. I said. And my voice was thick. The real pain. It wasn't just being hungry. Dad. It wasn't even fainting at the interview. I had to take a breath. It was knowing that while I was in my apartment, counting pennies to buy instant noodles, she was sending Ashley $10,000. It wasn't that she couldn't help me. It's that she saw my suffering. And she looked right at it. And she decided I wasn't worth it. My dad didn't hesitate. He reached across the table and put his hand over mine. His grip firm. You, he said. His voice absolute. Are worth everything. Tonight, I'm sitting in my own apartment. It's a new one. It's safe. It has a view of the city. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. My new, personal bank account. The numbers are healthy. The balance is secure. It's all mine. I closed the laptop. I looked out the window at the Chicago skyline. All the lights twinkling in the dark. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt free.